Good afternoon, you guys, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. Today, I'm going to be featuring to you my take on the prison deck for Cardfight Vanguard Overdress, Seraph Snow. Now, Seraph Snow is a deck that features the unique mechanic introduced only to Overdress featured Prison, which is where you put units into a prison and they stay there, and your opponent can only get them out by paying a certain cost to release a certain amount of units for the deck. Now, this deck's mechanic, in my opinion, is very interesting. At first, when I saw it, I thought to myself, like, okay, so basically the idea is that you force your opponent to use resources and you put the cards away, and like while they're draining their resources, they're getting stuff back, but is it really worth it? Which is my whole take on the deck and my thoughts when building it. But after playtesting the deck and seeing what cards we currently have out now, this deck actually is extremely amazing at resource management and controlling the field. And the control through the form of bribery is actually a lot different than what we're used to. I thought it was going to be like lock or maybe like retiring, where yeah, you blow their stuff up, but because it's in a prison, they have to pay a cost, and depending on what skills that they use, and you'll damage manipulate your opponent, and then they'll have to decide, do they want their cards back or keep it locked or retired or whatever it is you want to call it. And I really do enjoy playing this deck. My only thing about this deck is that the fact that although it's got all these cool things and this unique feature, it is a little bit weak on the power, but that's something that we can talk about more throughout the deck profile. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on my Seraph Snow deck. Alright, y'all, so to get started off with the deck profile, this is my ride chain for the deck. I'm featuring the ride chain for Seraph Snow, the one that came with the trial deck. This is the best lineup for Seraph Snow because it's the only lineup. Not much to say here. You pretty much search out your prison card, you put one card in the prison, so that this way you have access to certain abilities earlier in the game. And then later in the game, you'll obviously use other skills to lock more of your opponent's prison units and gain skills from that. Now moving on to the main deck, I play 3 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Seraph Snow. Aurora Battle Princess Seraph Snow is our main grade 3 of the deck, so we obviously want to max out as many copies of her as we can for the sake of persona writing. This card is extremely amazing on the Vanguard and Rearguard circle, because something that I've noticed that a lot of people don't know is that the second ability is actually a Vanguard or Rearguard circle ability, and that's very important to note because you can use the skill on the Vanguard and the skill on the Rearguard to lock potential of up to 4 of your opponent's units. And being able to do that exponentially increases your ability to imprison more of your opponent's cards, as one thing that you're going to notice about a lot of these units that have the ability to prison something, they usually target cards in the front row. So having a unit that can get cards in the back row as well is extremely important, because against decks like Magnolia or decks like Zorga or other decks like Eugene that can build a board and can easily get rid of their front row and not care about it and have stuff in their back row to manipulate with, or decks like Bastion that just create full boards for free, having the ability to imprison as much as you can is really good, so you can activate all the best skills on your turn. So offensively speaking, it's really powerful, and the additional 10,000 power she gets in the Vanguard is really amazing as well, as unfortunately one of the main weaknesses of this deck is that I noticed that a lot of the attacks that you get aren't very strong, and the cards that do gain power don't do anything else other than getting power. So it's sort of like a plus for one thing, but a takeaway from another. Seraph Snow is really amazing though. I'm very excited to see where the prison mechanic is going in the future. For my next grade 3, Granite Road Fighter. Now, Granite Road Fighter is another one of the units that gains power and another front row imprisoning card. You're mainly just playing this card because it's an act ability where if you don't want to use Counterblast, you can use Soul instead to imprison a unit and get power, making the 15k attacker, which is extremely important, as one of the ways that this deck is going to be able to get off offensively, it's a 3 attack deck, is by making columns of 15k plus 8 to 23,000 to your Vanguard, because 10,000 point shields in Overdress is different, as you only have 5k and 15k shields, and the only way that you usually get 10k shields is through other effect. So having this card to generate power and imprison is really important. Moving on to my next grade 2. So I'm going to be honest here, guys. I'm only playing this card just because it's really cool looking in my opinion, and in some cases it is for certain matchups, but I play 2 copies of Causality Goes Crazy as I Will It. Now, this card, the artwork and the design for it is just so cool looking to me. And the effect that it does is very important as well. It has it's a blitz, or it's actually a normal order card that is a Soul Blast 1, and you choose one of your Vanguards and it gets plus 10,000 power until the end of the turn. Now, this is a card that I'm only playing just because I think it's cool looking, but in certain cases this actually does come up because one of the main issues, like I was saying earlier, is the fact that this deck has a hard time generating numbers. So in the circumstances where we need to generate just more power and we have to put the effect on our Vanguard to do that is important as well, as there might be times where Seraph Snow may not be able to get her additional 10,000 power. It's very rare for that to happen, but if you can't get the 10,000 power and you just have a hard time imprisoning your opponent's units, that's where this comes through. This card can be replaced with anything. Honestly, this is just a personal tech choice just to get more offensive advantage. But originally, I thought this card was a blitz order. I don't know why they didn't make it a blitz order. It's a normal order, and that's the one thing that makes this card unplayable for most players. But I'm just playing it because it does catch people off guard when you get the extra 10,000 power into Seraph Snow and her. Moving on to my grade 2s, I play 4 copies of Grapple External. Grapple External is just another 15k attacker of the deck. Again, we really are trying to max out on our offensive capabilities as possible. Having control is good, but not being able to attack our opponent with all the control that we have, unfortunately, is not good either. So 15k attacker with the imprisoning of our opponent's units is good. For my last grade 2, I play 4 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Agra Rogue. Now, Aurora Battle Princess Agra Rogue is the most flexible and best grade 2 for the prison archetype. She becomes a 15k attacker and a 10,000 point shield as long as your opponent has 2 or more cards in their prison. And her ability to prison something when placed is extremely helpful as well. It's another on place in the front row card, which is why I emphasize the Vanguard or rearguard skill of our grade 3 Seraph Snow. But being able to imprison a unit and get additional shield and power all on one card is amazing. This card most definitely is a 4-of in any Seraph Snow deck. I can't imagine playing less than 3. So that's something important to note, as well as just how versatile this card is for the deck. Moving on to my grade 1s, I play 1 copy of the Galaxy Central Prison Galactus. This is the prison that you search out through your ride chain. You don't need to play more than 1 of this card because there doesn't exist any order cards yet that destroy other set orders, and even if there did, I don't feel like you would play more than 1 in that case. But for right now, you only need 1 because there's no MST for set orders in Overdress at the moment. My next grade 1 is 2 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Kyanite Blue. Now, Kyanite Blue has a rearguard ability, which is on the rearguard circle. If your opponent has an imprisoned card, you may counterblast 1, soul blast 1, and draw a card. So this is just another card that helps us filter out through our deck more for other key pieces for our offensive strategies, and so forth. 4 copies of Hyper Speed Robo Cheval-Stud. 4 copies of Hyper Speed Roy Cheval-Stud. Cheval-Stud is an important grade 1. He's actually a on target imprison something, which is important to note because this is also an act ability, meaning that throughout any period in the game, as long as we can pay the cost for a skill, we can choose something on our opponent's board and imprison it. That's something very unique to the prison archetype, just because we don't have too many cards besides our actual Vanguard that have this ability to imprison something throughout later in the game or when it's in place. So having Cheval-Stud to give us that imprison from anywhere on the board is extremely helpful. Another important thing to note is that he also has an on-draw ability if you have 3 or more cards in your opponent's prison, meaning that he's another card that we play in the deck that allows us to go and find our key pieces, just like our Kyanite Blue does, except Kyanite Blue does it on place, whereas this card can do it consistently as long as we meet the requirements for its skill. For my next grade 1, I play 4 copies of Detonation Mutant Bobalmine. Detonation Mutant Bobalmine is the best form of resource management that we currently have for Brant Gate. It lets us put itself into the soul and get a counter charge as long as we have a set order, seeing as how our prison is something that we get really early in the game if we get into a battle, or if our opponent tries to control our resources, we have this card to fall back onto. So that this way that we can get our soul and character charging back for our skills, to make sure that we can pay the cost for all these counterblast soul blast skills that we have for imprisoning our opponent's rear guards. For this card is a must until we get all the other cool resource management cards that we're getting in set 2 for Seraph Snow. And for my last grade 1, I play 4 copies of Violate Dragon. Violate Dragon is the grade 1 Sentinel for our deck in Brantgate. Not much else to say about this card. You really do need the Sentinel. It's your best form of absolute defense. And considering the fact that all of these new Sentinels have the ability to be free when you have one or less card in hand, is extremely helpful. And now for our triggers. So for my 1 over trigger, I am playing the Star Dragon Deity of Infinite Eldobreath. Now, Star Dragon Deity Infinite of Eldobreath is, without a doubt, in my opinion, besides the Keter Sanctuary one, the best over trigger that we have on the game. Being able to double the power and critical of your front row units is amazing, especially in a deck like this where you only have access to 3 attacks a turn. That means that when your first attack with this card goes through on your Vanguard circle, it ends up becoming your most important attack, which is why a lot of games now for players that have this card pay attention to when your opponent attacks with the Vanguard first, because that tells you that they haven't drawn their over trigger just yet, and they're preying on getting this card to make sure that their other rearguard attacks are extremely devastating to you as well. As one of the main things that we've been speaking about through this entire video is that the prison cards, while powerful through control, they don't have much power offensively. So relying on your over trigger to pretty much make up for all of that, especially to generate a final turn out of nowhere, is amazing, as that's what this card allows you to do. And with the 1 million power as well, that means that one of your units is going to be almost unblockable with additional critical unless they have a Sentinel, and then the other unit will have a critical, but its power will be over 33,000. And currently right now in Overdress, it's actually a very big deal, because guarding with requiring 10,000 point shields is awkward, as it's only 5,000 or 15,000. So therefore, having this card is a must. I don't think you can play any Brantgate deck without it. It's the same thing that I said about the Keter Sanctuary over trigger. This is just one of those over triggers where it's not as flexible to not play. For the rest of my triggers, I play 7 critical. I'm playing 3 copies of Cardinal Draco Barbizonde, 4 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Lourus Yellow, 4 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Amy Orange. I'm playing 4 draw triggers instead of more criticals, because even though we have more drawing in this deck, I still feel like there are games where I wish I just saw this card, or there are other key pieces that I wanted to see. But I definitely can see myself in the future, especially with the final set list of all the support coming out, dropping one of these for more criticals, or even fronts in the matter, just because of the offensive power of the deck. And I'm just playing 4 right now until we get the new support. But if you want to play more criticals, I'm all for it. I just play 4 right now to see the key pieces that I need to make sure that my early game goes well, which is one of the best opportunities you get to be offensive. And for my last trigger, I play 4 copies of Aurora Battle Princess Treuse Green. Alright, you guys, so these are my final thoughts on the deck. I think that Aurora Battle Princess Seraph Snow is an amazing grade 3. She gets you additional power, she gets you a +1 drive. Her ability to imprison stuff is Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, which makes her a versatile grade 3 for future decks if you wanted some form of control in the future. The deck has really good control. It's got really good resource management. You got Bobalmine, Kyanite Blue, Cheval Stud. All these cards do control and resource management, as 2 of those cards that you draw, one gives you a counter charge and a soul charge. And the additional power-up cards that you have, like Groinoid Fighter and External Grapple, is extremely helpful. I think that the one issue that I really have with this deck is that the prison mechanic is powerful if your opponent lets you do it, because there are games where your opponent will like control, or if they know how to play around the matchup, they can limit you to the number of cards that you can put in the prison, and therefore you have to played differently in order for you to make sure that you can take advantage of what they do have in the prison already, as there are games where a lot of these cards aren't going to get their power-up skills or their bonuses if you can't put something into the prison. Very rarely does that happen, because if your opponent doesn't let you put anything in the prison, it does kind of minus their own strategy, because that means that they're not calling stuff out, or they're removing stuff that they already have from their board to make sure that you come after them. But depending on who you're playing against and if they know how to play around the matchup, then it does become an issue. Other than that, my other issue with the deck is just what I said earlier, is that I wish this deck had more offensive capabilities. Yeah, you have cards like External Grapple, Roinoid Fighter, and Aggro Rogue, who are all really good offensive cards, but they don't really make like extremely good numbers, and then they don't do anything else that helps your offense out as well. So if you're looking for a deck that's going to be really good with control and resource management, then Seraph Snow is perfect. But as far as like really big numbers in offense, you're not going to get that from this deck. This deck is 3 attacks, 23k is the max you usually get, besides triggers and effects added, and that's just usually what you're going to be dealing with. So there's a lot of games that you have to consider and just know your matchups if you really want to succeed with this deck, in my opinion. That is all for today's deck profile, guys. Thank you so much for watching and checking out my video. Tell me what you guys think about my take on Seraph Snow in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I have a lot more deck profiles coming out for the rest of the nations of Card Fight Vanguard Overdress. And if your friends looking for a Seraph Snow deck profile to use as a template, go ahead and share this video with them, like all of my decks are. And stay tuned for the other deck profiles I have coming out. Alright, y'all. See you later.